These are my top 10 VR games. So hi everyone, hope you are doing well. Thanks for pressing play once again. I'm the man they call Pixel Paul, and this is my top 10 VR games, specifically PlayStation VR games. So I've had PSVR for about just under a year now, completely brand new to VR gaming. As you may know from my sort of series of VR videos on this channel, yeah, completely new to playing VR and completely new to collecting VR as well. But I'm not really new now. Like I said, about a year into it now, and I've played a fair few of the games that I've got. I've collected quite a few VR games which are still there waiting to be played. There's quite a few that I've not played through. But I think I've got to the point where I thought I could probably pick 10 games that I would say are my favourite VR games at the moment, a top 10. So I've done top 10s before, and this is what we're going to do this time, top 10 VR games. Before we get into the top 10, I'm going to show you 3 games which I will call them notable exceptions, is that, or something like that. 3 games that didn't quite make it into the top 10, but that I have enjoyed. So the first one is Arizona Sunshine. I am enjoying that one. Great game, zombie shooter. Just not played a huge amount of it. I've not finished it yet, but what I have played, I've enjoyed it. It may sneak into my top 10 at some point, but we shall see. But a little nod to that one. I will also give a little shout out to Star Trek Bridge Crew, which I was not expecting to like, but it is quite enjoyable. I've quite enjoyed playing this one. It's one of these that you can just sort of stick on, do a quick mission or two, not spend a huge amount of time in it because it's quite complex, quite complicated, but at the same time it's quite relaxing. I've quite liked playing Bridge Crew, so yeah, quite enjoyed that one too. And then this one is a bit of a funny one because it's not necessarily a VR game, but there is a VR mode in it. And when I played it, I thought, actually, this really is kind of cool. It kind of works, this. And it's Tekken 7. So I don't think I've featured this on a video yet. But basically, what this does in VR is it basically puts you sort of in there with the fighters almost. You're sort of watching it from a third person perspective. So rather than just sort of watching it from the screen, you are kind of in that arena with them. I had no sort of idea how this was going to work, and possibly it wasn't quite how I expected it to, but it does. It's quite good. It's almost like a really up close kind of camera view to it, and it does work. It's quite good. And yeah, Tekken 7 is a good game as well. So yeah, those are my not quite made it into the top 10. So let's get into that now. Right, cheers everyone. Right, let's get into this top 10 then. So, and I have kind of done these actually in some sort of order. So I will go from sort of 10 to 1, with my favourite game being at number 1, obviously. So yeah, let's get into the first one. So the first one, a bit like Tekken 7, this isn't necessarily a dedicated VR game. And it was, yeah, you could probably say this is the first VR game that I had, or first VR compatible game that I had, before I even got the VR headset. And that game is Resident Evil Biohazard. Now, I have played Biohazard properly, I say properly, but you know, the sort of standard version of Resident Evil. And yeah, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the run through of this. It's different to all the other Resident Evil games. But when you play it in VR, and I haven't finished it all the way through in VR, but I played a fair chunk of it. This is on a different level. It is, it's absolutely amazing in VR. It's exceptionally creepy, very dark, very gloomy, very atmospheric. It's an absolute must, to be honest, for VR. And that's why it had to go into my top 10. So I haven't played it all the way through in VR, but I've played a fair bit, but I have finished it in sort of standard mode and really like it. Not my favourite ever Resident Evil game, but you know, a solid entry into the series. So that's my first pick for the 10. Number 10. At number 9, so this was kind of the first VR game then that I had after having got the headset, and to be honest, I actually got this with it. And the game is Farpoint. So yes, this was the first VR game. I think this was the first game that I actually tried as well. So obviously I got this with the headset, which I won, and this came with it. And for me, this, I mean, it's a shooter game. It's a sci-fi shooter. as a game, as a first-person shooter, it's pretty basic stuff. But as a VR game, and in particular, when you play it with the aim controller, which I think it sort of came bundled with at one point, when you play it with this, it becomes a whole different sort of game, which is a bit of an exaggeration possibly. But with the aim controller, it does make it 10 times better than playing it with just a standard controller, because it kind of, unlike other first-person shooters on VR, the control system just feels how I expected it to be. And I guess because I played this one first, when I've played other first-person shooters and it has the teleportation system, that just doesn't feel quite right. Whereas in Farpoint, it felt like how I was imagining it was going to be. So I really have enjoyed Farpoint. It's quite sort of a decent sort of time frame for this game. I think it's just under 5 hours it took, something like that, about 5 hours. And there are some extras which you can spend a bit more time sort of looking for. It's not, I wouldn't say it's sort of Starship Troopers in space, sort of Starship Troopers in VR or anything like that. Similarities in a way, the weapons, the creatures that you're shooting, which are like bug sort of creatures. But there's kind of like a decent sort of story to it. Two scientists sort of stranded on this planet together, and watching that sort of story unfold is quite good. Graphically, yeah, I mean, for a VR game, it lacks a sort of bit of detail that maybe other first-person shooters would have. But again, yeah, just it's been an experience, first-person shooter in VR. Yeah, as an experience, I just really enjoyed it. And having the aim controller to play with as well, yeah, it's a must for this game. So, yeah, Farpoint is my number 9 game. At number 8, this one I was a bit on the shelf with whether to include this at all, actually, because it's a lot of fun and at the same time quite frustrating as well. When you get into it and you get the hang of it, it's quite good. I've played most of this now, but I haven't quite finished it. I've got I think the last 2 missions to get through. But what I have played, I really did enjoy eventually, once you get the hang of it. And that game is Iron Man VR. So you play this one with the 2 Move controllers, which they're up there. And yeah, it's quite a learning curve to this. The first mission, which is sort of set inside and outside of a sort of a plane or Tony Stark's jet, is an absolutely amazing opener for a game. It's really dramatic, very well done, and it's a good sort of scene setter. It does kind of teach you the controls, but then when you get into the main game, things just start to get that little bit more fiddly. So you have more of a free roaming kind of movement around. They are kind of like map or circular sort of maps, like cities and things like that. And yeah, the flight can be quite tricky. Flight and shooting at the same time is quite tricky. Flight, shooting and switching weapons is really tricky. It just takes a lot of getting used to, and there's an awful lot of kind of bumping around and not feeling fully in control. But when you do get the hang of it, and when you get going with it, you do feel like Iron Man, and it's a lot of fun. It's just you do have to persevere with it. So I did enjoy Iron Man. I have enjoyed what I've played of it. Yeah, it makes it into my top 10 because I love the character as well. So yeah, Iron Man VR, just into the top 10. Right, next up, something a little bit different. So I went for Driveclub VR. Now, I think on PlayStation VR, there are 2 games which, for drivers, are kind of the ones that stand out. Driveclub VR and Gran Turismo. Now, I've gone for Driveclub VR just because, I don't know, I just felt like this was a little bit more arcadey slightly. So if you've watched any of my videos before and I've spoken about racing games, you will know that I sort of prefer arcade races over simulation sort of races, and this just felt a little bit more arcadey. Now whether it actually is or not, I don't know, maybe you guys will tell me, but it felt it. But I really enjoyed Driveclub VR. Having a lot more sort of races on the track with you as well sort of is a plus. Graphically, I thought it was Again, maybe it's just me, but graphically I thought this was slightly better than Gran Turismo as well. Again, you guys might tell me differently. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And again, playing it in VR, being able to sort of get in the car, behind the wheel, and just be there in that sort of first person perspective. Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing. And I really enjoyed Driveclub VR. So yeah, that one's in there as well. Okay, next up, and I think this probably will be possibly the cheapest game that you can pick up in this top 10, I think. Yeah, it probably is actually. I've gone for Battlezone. Again, I think so. I got this for £4. I think it's still about £4. If it's any more, it won't go that much more. It certainly won't go down, I don't think. But yeah, about £4 you can get this for. And yeah, this was a bit of a surprise for me. So Battlezone, based on the old sort of Battlezone arcade game. This has a very kind of Tron or original Tron kind of look to it. Even the tanks sort of look a little bit like the tanks from the original Tron film. And again, sort of being able to immerse yourself with the headset on into the cockpit of that one of these tanks. It's just quite, again, it's just quite an experience. It's just quite different. And it handles really well. It handles just how I expected it to. And the sort of combat, shooting and all that, it's all done pretty well. It's a sort of funny way the sort of level, well, not level design, but game design is, so you basically fight across a grid. So again, I've not made my way all the way across like one of the grids in the game, and not finished it, but it is kind of more of a game that I've been sort of just picking up and playing for sort of 5-10 minutes. And every time I have done, I've just enjoyed it. And yeah, I think it's a very decent VR game, that one. So Battlezone, another one for the top 10. Right, we are now on to the final 5. At that point, I'm going to have a quick cup of tea. Okay, so in at number 5, and this is my most recent VR pickup. And it's one that I knew was very highly rated. I think when official PlayStation magazine used to be around, they used to have like a top 50, something like that, top 50 VR games that you must own. And I think this was it top? I think it might have been top in their list. If not, it's certainly very high anyway. And that game is Tetris Effect. So I'm a huge fan of Tetris. I love the original Tetris. My first ever video game that I owned and played. And this is quite a version of it. It's, again, sort of hard to explain without you actually seeing it. But basically, at its core, it's still just Tetris. Except you are, again, immersed into this world where there is a Tetris table or Tetris grid right in front of you. You're playing Tetris, and everything around you kind of reacts to what you do in that Tetris table, if you like, in that grid. So if you make a line, the music sort of changes slightly. If you make if you do a Tetris, the sort of surroundings of you sort of changes too and reacts to it. It's all done through different sort of themes. So there's like desert themes and I can't remember, icy sort of themes, all the usual sort of stuff. And it's just a very sort of spectacular, what's the word? Enveloping? It's like immersive. It's a very sort of immersive experience. You can just lose yourself playing this game. I mean, Tetris is one of those games, it's pick up and play, one more go kind of game. But in VR, you can just, for a little bit, just completely lose yourself, where you are. You're not moving around or anything like that. You can just sit there on a chair and play it. And like I say, just be completely immersed and drawn into this game. It's quite an experience, this one. I keep using that word experience, and I think that's the difference with VR gaming, is that it's a different kind of experience with VR gaming compared to just sitting and watching it on a screen. So yeah, Tetris, incredible game, this one. Did make it into my top 5, but it wasn't my overall favourite, but it is a very, very good game. Moving on. Now, again, this is a series that I really like. It's not necessarily a VR game, but it is VR compatible. And I remember putting this one on. I think it was the first racing game that I tried and was utterly blown away. Now this is a really good game anyway, standard wise. It's a really good racing game. But again, in VR, sat in the cockpit of one of these ships racing away is just an amazing experience. And it is Wipeout, the Omega Collection. So this is just the same, exactly the same game, except you are playing Wipeout in one of the ships, sat in the cockpit, and it's just incredible. Now, I actually thought playing it in VR was slightly easier. I thought it just felt a little bit easier to control the ships, because I know with Wipeout, a lot of people really sort of struggle with the way the sort of hovercrafts kind of handle, because it is different to other racing games. It's not like standard Ridge Racer or Gran Turismo or whatever. There is a different way of moving and sort of cornering and getting through areas as quickly as you can. It's a very sort of different game. But yeah, in VR, I just found it a little bit easier. I don't know why. Can't explain it. But yeah, just absolutely unbelievably amazing in VR, this one. So definitely in my top 5, and it is there at number 4. Right, so the top 3 games, and I think the top 1 was always going to be my favourite. But these two sort of vying for third and second place, very, very sort of close. So I've gone for at number 3, Blood and Truth. Amazing game, excellent game. I'd argue that this is one of the sort of more, it feels more like a sort of standard video game, if you like, or a first person shooter game compared to most VR games. It feels like it was, it just feels like a more sort of story driven, quite epic, very good production values to it as well. It feels like at some point this could have been just like a standard normal sort of first person shooter potentially, but in VR it's like stepping into, it says it there actually, be the action hero, and it does. It feels like you're stepping into some sort of action movie set in London, and it's a really amazing game. Again, a really good storyline. There's a nice mix of sort of gameplay styles to it as well. So as well as kind of those first person shooter type parts, there are kind of like run and gun on rail shooter type parts to it as well. So there's a nice mix. It's not just the same sort of game all the way through. And like I said before, the sort of script and storyline to it is really sort of, it's really good. It reminds me of kind of like, I don't want to say like your standard kind of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels kind of film. Something similar to that. For me, it had kind of the same sort of feel as Strike Back. I don't know if anybody remembers Strike Back, which used to be like on Sky One or something like that. There was a few series of that. Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of that, Strike Back. Yeah, absolutely amazing game again. If you have VR, fully recommend this one, Blood and Truth. Okay, so my second favourite game. I will go with this one as being the second favourite game. Again, this is I won't say experience, but it is a very sort of magical game. And as soon as I started to play this game, I just fell in love with it. I thought it was amazing. Moss. Now, I possibly wouldn't have given this one a go if it hadn't been for you guys telling me through my VR videos, sort of recommendations of VR games to try and play and grab. And some of you did mention this one to me, and I'm very thankful that you did, because it's amazing. I have utterly fallen in love with this game. I think it's just a special kind of game. And I do like these kind of games, these kind of, I don't want to say twee, but kind of sweet and nothing too threatening with it. Those kind of platform games where it's just kind of, I don't want to say cozy either. It's not a cozy game particularly, but it's just one that you don't get stressed at particularly. It's just one you can pick up, relax, enjoy, be tested, have to think about it. But at the same time, yeah, it's not a stressful kind of game in a way. Essentially, it's a 2D platform, 2D platformer where you kind of play in front, or you sort of stand in front of these areas and guide Moss, the little mouse, through. It's a puzzle platformer. And again, it's just in VR, possibly as a standard game, it would look nice, it would look great, possibly not have quite that kind of specialness to it, if you like, when you are in there in the game. And bearing in mind that you can sort of get close up to the areas that you're sort of working through, you can get up and close to the main character as well, and they'll look up at you a little bit and say hello. Just little things like that make it just a little bit more sort of magic than just sort of playing a standard kind of 2D 3D platformer game. And yeah, I just absolutely adore this game. Apparently there is a sequel, Book 2, I think it's called, Moss Book 2, I think. It was only a digital only game though, sadly. So yeah, physical copy you can't get hold of. But if you have VR, you must have Moss, because it's brilliant. And so, the number one game for VR, PSVR. And it's probably the most obvious choice, I know. But it's the obvious choice because it's the best game. It's the best game on PSVR that you can buy. It's just an amazing game, this one. You know what it's going to be. Astrobot Rescue Mission. This guy's getting a bit of a reputation for himself recently. Astrobot's Playroom on PlayStation 5 was amazing. Astrobot's standalone game, again, game of the year, whether you like it or not. Absolutely incredible game. But yeah, Astrobot Rescue Mission is just more of the same, but in VR. More immersive, more spectacular, more, it's to some extent possibly even that little bit more clever than the other games. And so much so that there are elements in, say, the newer Astrobot game that have been taken from this as well. It's a shame in a way that not more people have been able to play this game, because if you haven't got a VR headset, you're not going to be able to play it, which is kind of a shame in a way, because it's very, very good. I think I featured this in my first VR video, so there is some footage of the gameplay in there. But if you've played any of those two games, Playroom or Astrobot, then you'll know kind of what you're getting with this game, because it's more of the same. But just you are in there with him, controlling him from a sort of third-person perspective, but also then sort of interacting with the scenery as well as you go through it to help him sort of progress through each level. And it's just, again, a very special game, just a really awesome game, which I cannot speak more highly of. I've used the same words over and over in this sort of video: awesome, spectacular, immersive, I know, but they all sort of are relevant for Astrobot Rescue Mission. That is it. That is my current, and I will stress the word current, top 10 PlayStation VR games. All of these games I've played, all of these games I've played through thoroughly as well, I would say. And that's the stack there. So that's my PlayStation VR top 10 at the moment. I've plenty more VR games to play though. There are some up there that I have played and didn't get into the top 10, but there's a lot up there as well that I haven't yet touched. So, for example, I haven't yet played Mask Maker, I haven't played Eagle Flight, I've also not played The Impatient, which I really do want to play. So that's one that could sneak in there potentially. I've also still not played Groundhog Day. I keep wanting to play that, but it just keeps sort of ending up lower down the pile. Robinson the Journey, and also Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown as well. I still haven't played that one because and I've said this before, I've got a feeling that that one is going to send me into motion sickness hell. But I do want to play it. I'm just a little bit wary of it at the moment. There's also The Persistence. I've not played that yet. I've played it on the Xbox One. Weird, quirky game. Not quite sure how well or if it would be better in VR or not, but we'll see. But yeah, maybe, who knows, maybe in a year's time I'll do a second video of this and see if any of those games have changed, maybe bump some of them out for some of these ones that I've not yet played. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Let me know your top 10 VR games, or any games that you think that should be in my top 10 that I haven't potentially played yet, or any of those that I've mentioned then. Will they make it into the top 10? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Love to hear from you as always. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.